Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 30th of August, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me today, we have Debi Evans and Mark Anderson. Welcome to the programme, both. Now, we're going to get started with the censorship regime, which is developing very, very quickly in front of our eyes at the moment. Just a little bit of a recap, of course. Richard Medhurst here from before the weekend, arrested at Heathrow Airport under the Terrorism Act, Section 12, because of his reporting. That was then followed up in France with the arrest of Telegram founder Pavel Durov. And then yesterday, back in the UK, we had the arrest of Sarah Wilkinson. According to her husband, the police came to the house just before 7:30 a.m., 12 of them in total, some of them in plain clothes from the counter-terrorism police. They said she was under arrest for content that she has posted online. The house being raided, and they've seized all her electronic devices. It didn't end there. With the arrest of Richard Bernard, another pro-Palestine activist, after a targeted campaign by the Zionist lobby. Palestine Action's co-founder Richard Bernard facing 3 charges for 2 speeches. He's accused of supporting a proscribed organisation under the Terrorism Act and encouraging criminal activity. So this is what is happening very clearly with the people that are pushing a pro-Palestine narrative at the moment. Arrest under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act, which, of course, as we mentioned before, is related to whether you're considered to be promoting a so-called proscribed organisation, which in this case would be Hamas. But, of course, it's not just people on the Palestinian side that are being arrested for dissent and in some cases imprisoned. These people haven't been imprisoned yet, but others have. So let me just remind you then of Peter Lynch. This is the BBC covering this. This is one of the people that was posting stuff on social media. He turned up at one of the violent protests with a placard. The placard basically called the media and MPs, police officers, corrupt. It was just a placard with some writing on it alleging corruption. He also called the police scum. He made what the judge called racist and provocative remarks, but this is just, nonetheless, these are just remarks. He was not accused of throwing anything or taking part directly in any of the violent disorder. And the BBC, as I say, went on to say that he was filmed calling the police scum. He was imprisoned for 2 years, 8 months. And in the meantime, though, the person who threw stuff at Nigel Farage got a suspended prison sentence. So again, we're seeing 2-tier policing here and so on. But what we're actually seeing in front of our eyes, I believe, as I mentioned the other day, is a reenactment of Nazi Germany's editor's law. This is designed to produce a chilling effect on any kind of dissent, whether that be activist dissent or journalist dissent. And so it's perhaps massively ironic and hypocritical that Labour MP Catherine West was tweeting this out yesterday. Journalism is not a crime, yet 2 former Stan News editors have been found guilty of sedition in Hong Kong today for doing their job. Free media is essential if societies and economies are to prosper, but Hong Kong has dropped from 18th to 135th in the World Press Freedom Index since 2002. This is just off the charts. So if you're a country that we consider an enemy, we criticise that country if they are doing anything to shut down dissent in that country, while we are running a regime operation to shut down dissent in your own country. It is fantastic. Now, we're going to be talking about this gentleman later on. This is Lieutenant General Marco Bertolini. I'll introduce him later in another segment, but he was talking about Telegram in an interview recently, and he said, certainly if it's possible to have information coming from the dark side of the moon, it's thanks to Telegram. There will be a reduction of information as a result of what's happening to Durov. And he went on to say there's a problem of media control and propaganda. The media sound monotonous all over Europe. And this is absolutely true. So it shouldn't take a degree in rocket science then to work out who the enemy might be, because it isn't Muslims. It is the regime who is now cracking down on, for different reasons admittedly, but nonetheless cracking down on dissent from all sides of the political spectrum. It should be clear to everyone now, no matter which side of any argument we might be, that we are being treated the same by this out-of-control regime, is what I've put on this graphic. That is exactly the situation. And we've got to keep in mind that this regime, which is cracking down on dissent, is the same regime which is behind the blowing up of people in Gaza. It's behind the blowing up of people in Ukraine. And we need to recognize very quickly who the enemy actually is and act accordingly. That would be what I would suggest. Mark, you are a long-standing media man. Maybe you could comment on this from a United States point of view, because we shouldn't forget that the people who in the US were accused of being right-wing extremists on the 6th of January, some of those are still in prison.
Correct, Mike. There's agent provocateurs that show up at these gatherings where you have peaceful but passionate protests, and these provocateurs will show up and they'll come in buses and they'll all wear the same shoes so they'll know who each other is. Epoch Times brought this out, and then they'll ply their trade and create havoc intentionally, and then they'll smear and discredit the honest protesters with that. That's the technique that happened January 6th. And in the bigger picture, the mass media cartel is supporting all of this. So the media and the government together are part of this. And I'll comment on more on that kind of stuff in extra.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. Now, Debbie, let's move over to you. The NHS app is becoming a tool of surveillance, but you've got more on that.
Yes, I have to know everyone. Well, does the government need to control you? Well, they need a lot of things. They need your data, and sometimes I don't mind if my data, well, it puts a very powerful position. So is convenience control, transparent opacity, and what can we do?
Right. Debbie, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you there because your connection is really, really bad. Maybe you could try resetting that, and we'll see if we can come back to this story in a couple of seconds. I'm going to have to move on and come back to this. So we'll just do a quick bit of editing, and while Debbie's sorting that out, we'll just do an early ad break. And so here we go. If you like what the UK column does and you would like to support us, the place to go is support.ukcolumn.org. And we do need your financial support. It's what keeps us going. £5 a month gets a membership, and that gives access to the forums and to UK Column News Extra and so on. But do share material you find on the various platforms if you possibly can. ukcolumn.org and ukcolumnextracts.co.uk are the places to go for that material. And we do need you to be the algorithm for us, because we are absolutely banned on most platforms. If you could pick up something at the UK Column shop, that also helps us out a lot. And we still urge everyone to get a copy of Your Life in Their Hands if you possibly can. Now, the interview that Charles and I did with Bob Moran is up on the website. It went out at 1 p.m. yesterday. The response to that has been extremely positive. Bob, a very popular interviewee, and so if you haven't seen it yet, please watch it, but crucially share it. And Debbie, if you're back, your blog is up now.
It is, yes, I'm back. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. So I've put a bit of a hypothesis in this week's blog, something that you might not have thought of, the spike hypothesis. Have we been spiked? So please have a look at that. And anybody in Scotland, Project Caelus, you might need ear defenders and plenty more.
Okay, thank you. Another reminder of our live event on the 19th of October 2024. Speakers on screen at the moment. Do get to that if you possibly can. It's going to be a fantastic day. And then on September the 8th, That is Aviation Impossibilities, Deconstructing the Official Story of the 9/11 Hijackings and Air Defense Failures. That is being run by International Centre for 9/11 Justice, and we will be live streaming that, so it'll be in the usual places. The details are on the front page of the UK Column website at the moment. Brian and I will be speaking at the Heritage Party Conference on Saturday the 28th of September in Reading. Tickets available at heritageparty.org, so join for that as well. So Debi, Stephanie, yes, if I just do a quick bit of editing here and bring your material back on screen again, let's talk about the NHS app.
Yeah, so how can we take back control? So I found this article in the New Statesman that said the government is running before it can walk on NHS Digital, and says that actually 71% of NHS trusts are still relying on paper records and 4% are completely paper-based. But let's just not forget that AI has no regulation at all, and there's no preparation for any regulation either. And last week I reported Tony Blair has got other plans for a digital health record, and he wants to roll this out very quickly. But how? And this is how I believe they're going to start the whole procedure. So the NHS app, let's look at a little bit of video. Have you got the NHS app?
I'm Lauren.
I'm Ben.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Dion, and I use the NHS app.
It's owned and run by the NHS.
It helps me to manage my condition and book appointments.
I can renew medications on shift.
24/7.
All my repeat medication is on the app, and I select the ones I need when I need.
Being able to view my medical record helps me feel in control and managing my condition.
There's a fantastic service on it called a symptom checker.
It gives me gold standard NHS information at my fingertips.
So not only is it secure, it's also fast to set up.
I did it at work on my lunch break.
It's easy to use.
It makes life easier for me.
And the best thing is, it's free.
It's a no-brainer.
Download the NHS app.
So that's how to download it. And the NHS website, when we go there, they say that it's for convenience, and they tell you here how to download it. But I think that this could be the key to the door to a digital revolution. So how convenient is it? Who can use the NHS app? Well, you know what? 13-year-olds can use the NHS app, and 13 to 15-year-olds. And what can you do? Well, you can manage your appointments. You can pretty much do anything, order repeat prescriptions. You can also manage organ donation decision, interestingly, and you can access NHS 111. And how do you get on it? Well, you've got to prove who you are first. So with photo ID, and if you haven't got photo ID, apparently you can go to your GP to get registration details. Now, you'll probably want to know why I'm telling you all of this, and it will be clear in a minute. Because the NHS are very, very keen to roll this out. They are desperate to roll this out. The government is desperate, and they want NHS employees to become NHS app ambassadors, people who are passionate about digital technology. So what do? So in the next slide, you'll see that an ambassador promotes the app. They do face-to-face sessions. They network on social media. They get updated information, and interestingly, developing persuasion skills. So how do you become an NHS app? Well, they're very app ambassador. Well, they're very keen to recruit anybody pretty much. So in fact, even if you're not an NHS employee, if you've got an NHS, or if you haven't got an NHS email, but you happen to work for the council, a library, a parent partnership group, a charity, you too can keep up to date with the NHS app. Let's meet Kath McLennan, because Kath McLennan works for a GP practice. And what she does is that she plays videos on screens in the surgery, so you can get bombarded with that while you're waiting to see whoever. She mentions it every time she sees a patient, which sounds to me a bit like a nudge. She's got guidance posters in the surgery, and every conversation apparently is a golden opportunity, because in the next slide, she said that it's been so successful, 53% of patients have signed up, and that totals 24,837. What a golden opportunity that is. But who else is pushing the NHS app? So NHS employers are also pushing the Ambassadors app. but they're targeting children specifically, which is why I've highlighted this. Schools, colleges, careers, networking events. But how? How are they targeting all these young people? And I found this organisation called Inspiring the Future, which is a little bit dark, isn't it? Because they've interacted already with 400,000 young people through school assemblies and, again, speed networking, career days, and they connect with teachers. And this is all in the name of health literacy, which is the new subject you're going to hear about coming up. And health literacy, what's that? Well, according to the NHS, it's making people aware of health outcomes, giving you a healthy lifestyle. And it's basically, you've got to be your own doctor and nurse. You're going to be managing your own conditions, and you're basically going to be living on a cloud with AI and bots, and you'll be able to manage your medicines through it as well. But if you're having any problems with the NHS app and you need some help, then ask a librarian. Perhaps we'll ask Professor Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy, because they're third most trusted professionals in Britain. They don't actually reference that, but apparently librarians are third most trusted professionals. And we have now got a staggering 34 million people registered up, or that's what they allege, registered up to the NHS app. But how desperate are they? Really desperate. They really are. And I've got a couple of clips from the February NHS board meeting. I would advise everybody to go and look at it, because they are really desperate. Have a look at this first clip.
This board is presiding over what is, I believe, the biggest change in how the NHS engages with its citizens that we have seen for many, many decades. We're in a place now whereby we have got more than 3/4 of our adults who have downloaded the app. We've got 97% of our practices able to communicate with those patients. And the numbers just keep growing exponentially. And there are lots of numbers that you've heard today, but over 4 million people a day accessed their medical records last week. This is an appetite that we are fulfilling through the NHS app.
My goodness, aren't they desperate? And here's another little short clip, NHS board meeting.
At the moment, the app's focused on people that need the NHS to support their illness. We've got a full programme coming up over the next 12 months to move the vaccination and screening programmes onto the app, because we know that patients who book their own appointments are more likely to turn up for them. And the more patients we can get screened, vaccinated, the better. We're putting the digital health check onto the NHS app. I have to say, to start with, it's not going to be amazing. But, I shouldn't say but, I should say and we have to start somewhere, which is allow the patient to order their home testing kit and send it back. Because we know over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, that home testing kit will be available on their phone. It will be available electronically. And if you don't believe me, I looked yesterday at the camera that sits by the bedside that takes all of the vital signs of the patient in front of them without touching the patient. And when you then think about what that might do to the new hospital programme and how that tech can evolve, and when we talked about virtual wards earlier on, how do we connect the virtual ward technology into the NHS app so that citizens can use that and monitor their health data? Most of us have wearables on us. The future of how we use our NHS app and giving our citizens their digital account to manage their own healthcare is stunning. And for those that don't believe, and there are some, we are saying, I think very conservatively, that we want to move 1/3 of all of our health interactions to being digital first over the next 5 years.
So there you go. This is the route. And in order to give a bit of balance, because 34 million people have apparently downloaded the app, to give a bit of balance, it would put a bit of a rock in Sir Keir Starmer's pond if people didn't want the app anymore and chose to delete it. So here's a little tiny short video, and thanks so much to Sam in our team for doing this, of if you don't want it, how do you get rid of it?
From your main mobile phone home screen, Scroll across the pages until you get to the page with the NHS app icon. Hold down the icon button until the menu appears. Click App Info. In the new menu you're taken to, click Uninstall.
That would be disastrous, wouldn't it be, for the government if everybody chose to perhaps delete it and take control back of their data? What thinks you? You decide.
Debbie, I think you were going to remind everybody about the NHS board meeting.
Oh, yes. Yes, please do. 17th of September. The tickets are now available to book, and please join me. Could be Dame June's last. Who knows?
Who knows? Okay, and Mark, let's come back to you. Now, you've got a bit of a correction to make for the Bird Flu Summit segment last week.
Yeah, last week I reported on the seemingly imminent machinations at the WHO of declaring a public health emergency of international concern, basically the criteria for a pandemic, the new pandemic. And in so doing, I talked about how the WHO is pressing monkeypox as the thing to worry about, but downplaying the bird flu. On the other hand, I found what appeared to be a legitimate summit on the bird flu, which of course gave more urgency to that issue. But it turns out that according to the research of Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy, the UK column contributing reporter, this appears to be a bogus event that purportedly was going to take place in early October in DC, bogus, illegitimate, some sort of scam. And so I found what should have been reported, and this is absolutely legitimate, the International Avian Influenza Summit, the Center for Excellence for Poultry Science at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville is going to hold this summit at the Don Tyson Center for Agricultural Sciences, September 30 through October 3rd. By the way, the Tyson family was a big contributor to the Clintons, just a quick footnote. And that's the actual event. I believe there's one more slide just to give it a little bit more of a news angle. What is this summit? Well, basically they're saying since January of 22, multiple viruses have infected tens of millions of wild birds, allegedly, commercial poultry flocks, and more than 24 species of terrestrial and marine mammals worldwide, allegedly. And they're going on to say, this is why we decided to modify the scope of the summit this year to cover the HPAI matters in commercial poultry and wildlife, as well as including emerging issues to cover other important economic diseases affecting commercial poultry, swine, cattle, bees, and humans, and doing that all as One Health. And that's in capital letters, One Health. That's a key concept that we brought up many times in UK column, where the value and the balancing of the health of the planet among flora and fauna and animals and human beings are put on the same level as plants and animals. And so there's sort of a devaluation of human life that's involved in this. Yes, you want a healthy biosphere and a healthy environment that does help people remain healthy, but this is deeper than that, where people are put on the same level as the rest of the animal kingdom and the plant world. So a very troubling kind of leveling concept there, one world concept. But that's the newest issue along with that correction, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And keep the idea of One Health in mind because we're going to hear about one something else in just a moment. But we'll just start off with Ukraine here. And of course, this is the gift that keeps on giving for the regime that we are living under at the moment. Now, I want to begin by highlighting this article from the Italian media. We'll do a quick translation of the headline there. So the new Kiev peace plan widens the war with the help of NATO. The latest Russian airstrikes in Ukraine are proceeding in parallel with the advance in the Donbass. Kiev aims to involve NATO countries. And of course, we've heard a lot over the last little period about an alleged peace plan that Zelensky is wanting to pursue and so on. Let's bring the Lieutenant General back on screen again. This is an Italian military man. And in this article, which is where the previous quote came from as well, in this article he is saying, he is quoted as saying that Zelensky wants to survive this current situation, so current critical situation, involve as many countries as possible, NATO and the US in this war. I would not believe so much in the willingness to come to a negotiation. So he's absolutely skeptical about Zelensky's claims that he's working towards getting to the negotiating table. Russia has launched a major intervention against Ukrainian power plants, he says, not an operation dictated by irritation, but one that has been planned for some time. It has incapacitated the Ukrainian electrical grid even more, creating problems that, although now limited to blackouts, could become dramatic this winter. Zelensky will present a peace plan, but Kremlin spokesman Peskov said that there's no longer any talk of negotiations now. So what he's saying is that as far as the Russians are concerned, this is not a serious suggestion on behalf of Zelensky. But anyway, Bertolini went on to say, there are those who pushed for this. Britain has done so, with the United States a little less. We presume that the British have been particularly active, and that seems to be the case. I mean, we've been reporting that for the last 2 years, how active Britain has been in pushing this. So what exactly is Britain pushing? Well, this is Gilbert Doctorow, who's based in Brussels, an American analyst of Russian affairs, and he's taking quotes from a program called The Great Game. It's a talk show, and so let's just have a look at what he's saying here. This is his conclusion. Let us not have any illusions. If the Russians sense that the United States is about to pounce on them, to use the assets in Ukraine and beyond, not just against Russian planes, which have been moved back beyond the 900-kilometre range of Storm Shadows, for example, but on critical civilian infrastructure to disable the war effort, then a preventative Russian attack on NATO, on the continental United States, not to mince words, is entirely conceivable. Now, of course, what is he talking about? He's talking about the recent efforts by Ukraine to bomb the Kursk nuclear power plant, and this is becoming extremely dangerous. The Russians have responded to this, and Sergei Lavrov has said this. I think it's important to understand that this situation that we have, our own doctrine, he's talking about a nuclear doctrine, including the one governing the use of nuclear weapons. An effort to update this is underway. Moreover, he said, these Americans are well aware of the provisions it sets forth. Now, it seems to me that what's going on here is that the Britain, and in particular the United States and the EU, are effectively attempting to bait Russia into using nuclear weapons by keeping the pressure on and particularly attacking the nuclear power plant in Kursk. Now, my question, and a question that I've been wondering about for quite a long time, is where are the Greens in this? Where are the environmentalists? Because here's Britain's Green Party, and there seems to be absolute silence from them. Not only with respect to the environmental damage that's being done by the wars, which our governments are actively pursuing at the moment around the world, but by the nuclear danger. And the question is why? Now, if we go back to a year or so ago, the nuclear power station that was under Ukrainian attack at that time was Zaporizhia, and the statement from them at the time was Ukraine's attempts to shell the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant continue. Today, a kamikaze drone was shot down over the power plant. It fell on the roof of the 6th power unit. Threats to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant safety have not been identified. And this is the comment from the IAEA Director General at the time. This is a major escalation of the nuclear safety and security dangers facing the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Such reckless attacks significantly increase the risk of a major nuclear accident and must cease immediately. So that was then. This is now. In the meantime, we have, again, IAEA chief warning of risks of nuclear accident at Russian power plant in the Kursk region. Then we have more comments from Italy, this time to executive intelligence review by Italian scientists, saying that the German Greens, they're looking at Germany in particular because the Greens are in the coalition there, want to have a nuclear accident in Kursk because they would use it to counter the resurging pro-nuclear wave in Europe. This is, I think, fairly accurate, and we've got to ask the question, why are the Greens so silent on this? We need to be putting some pressure in that direction. But coming back to the UK then, well, you'll be glad to know that there's a new era for defence because the government is launching a root and branch review of UK armed forces. Charles mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. This is the new integrated defence review, or the new defence review. And if you remember, they were talking about, strategic defence review. It's going to be headed by 3 external reviewers in a first of its kind for UK defence, Lord Robertson being at the head of the group, who's the former Defence Secretary and also a former NATO Secretary General. Here he is. So, he is going to be leading this. But you'll be glad to know that, first of all, that the Strategic Defence Review will determine the roles, capabilities and reforms required by UK defence to meet the challenges, threats and opportunities of the 21st century, deliverable and affordable within the resources available to the defence within the trajectory of 2.5% of GDP. But the review will ensure that defence is central to both the security and to the economic growth and prosperity of the United Kingdom. The reviewers would like to take this opportunity to engage widely and seek public views. Your input is encouraged and welcome. So there is a public consultation going on. And I just wanted to mention this aspect of the scope of that public consultation because they have used the term one defence. Now, this term has been used rarely over the last few years. It has been around for a couple of years, but I just thought we'd just let you know what that is. Because this is from Rolly Walker, the new Chief of the General Staff. Thanks to Charles for sending me this. And he was saying at a recent RUSI conference, and these forces will lie at the heart of NATO and be filled with the best soldiers in the world, supported by incredibly committed civilian staff and leading industrial partners and the nation itself, and providing value at every turn, societally, politically, internationally, economically, as well as just militarily. This is the one defence mindset that the Secretary of State referred to yesterday, and to which I fully subscribe. So let's look at a definition or a comment from another document. The approach to recruiting, educating, training and retaining people needed for one defence, including regular, reserve, civil service and industry. This is to include how service life can be improved for those who commit to serve their country in uniform. This one defence is not just limited to Britain either. This term is being used in Australia and other countries within the Western Bloc. And this seems to be the absolute integration of the military with civilian and other infrastructure, but also internationally as well. And just very briefly, this is the call for evidence for the Strategic Defence Review. It's a great opportunity to get involved in this discussion. With the show notes, we'll have the link to this, and I suggest that everybody gets involved. And now, Mark, let's come over to you and the 30-year anniversary of a shocking, as you describe it, arms survey.
Yeah, this is sort of out of my reporter's notebook, out of my files, Mike. At the time, I was working for the South Bend, Indiana Tribune. I was about 10 years into being a journalist, and I was just waking up to what was going on in the world. And a guy named Al Foreman out of Elkhart, Indiana, had just received this from the John Birch Society, publishers of the New American Magazine. It used to be called American Opinion. And he received it, and he mailed me a copy right away. And I found it in my file the other day, and I was thinking about it in terms of how the military, as you just got done talking about, Mike, is amalgamating into something different. It doesn't really defend the nation state that it's born from anymore. It's just sort of a world police force that looks like it's intended to just put down recalcitrant or rebellious countries or factions or even individuals to control the narrative, to control the basic tyrannical regime. And to do that, you have to move the goalpost and change the basic framework of the military. And so 29 Palm Survey, What Really Motivated Its Author by John F. McManus from the New American, sidebar to the cover story, I'm Not a UN Soldier by William Norman Grigg. Now that's something we can talk about on the side or maybe an extra. But moving on, Veteran readers of the New American are vibrantly aware of the May 10, 1994 Combat Arms Survey administered to 300 active duty Marines at the Marine Corps Base 29 Palms, California. Among its 46 questions, in fact, it was the 46th question, the Marines were asked if they'd be willing to swear to a United Nations Code of Conduct and if they would fire on Americans who refused to turn over their privately owned weapons to the government. Other questions sought the soldiers' approval or disapproval about their involvement in an assortment of operations far removed from proper military assignments, far removed from the U.S. Constitution and what the military is supposed to protect, I might add, some of which would even place them under formal UN command. One of the Marines who participated in this exercise became so disturbed by the questions that he obtained an extra copy and sent it to the New American. And through that connection, that's how I received a copy, as I mentioned. No sooner had the New American's published report about this survey reached readers than several congressmen fired off inquiries to the Marine Corps and the Navy. Spokesmen for both branches of the service issued statements claiming there was really nothing to be concerned about, that the survey was merely part of its author's research for a master's degree thesis. This is from John F. McManus, a longtime Birch Society officer and New American editorial staffer. Anyway, moving on from there, this is actual photographs I took from the survey. This is page 1, Combat Arms Survey. This questionnaire is to gather data concerning the attitudes of combat trained personnel with regards to non-traditional missions. Non-traditional basically means you're breaking away from simply defending your nation and you're getting into foreign command and all sorts of things, globalist things. All of your responses are confidential. Write your answers directly on the questionnaire form. Place an X in the space provided for your response. Now, cutting to the chase, here's the exact question number 46. The last question in the survey asked to these Marines at that Marine base. The U.S. government declares a ban on the possession, sale, transportation, and transfer of all non-sporting firearms. A 30-day amnesty period is permitted for these firearms to be turned over to the local authorities. At the end of this period, a number of citizen groups refused to turn over their firearms. Consider the following statement. I would fire upon U.S. citizens who refuse or resist confiscation of firearms banned by the U.S. government. And they were asked to check strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree, or no opinion. And then there's a little bit about the outcome on this. The survey results on question 46, 42.3% strongly disagreed with that statement that they would fire on their fellow Americans, but 19.3% disagreed. Wait a minute. Strongly disagreed.
Yes, and 18.6% agreed.
Yeah, 42% strongly disagreed. I'm sorry, 19.3% disagreed. There's strongly disagreed and disagreed. I beg your pardon. 18.6% agreed, 7.6% strongly agreed, and 12.0% had no opinion. So there was a discernible amount that would go along with that. In one of the footnotes appearing in this thesis, the writer of which was Navy Lieutenant Commander Ernest Guy Cunningham, there's comments placed by some of the Marines next to their answers to this question. So this was a thesis carried out by this Ernest Guy Cunningham, a Navy Lieutenant Commander, and he included that very touchy question. But some of the angry soldiers responded, what about the damn Second Amendment? I feel like this is a first in communism. Another said, I would not even consider it. The reason we have guns is so that people can overthrow the government when or if the people think the government is too powerful. Another soldier said, freedom to bear arms is our Second Amendment. If you take our amendments away, then you can take this job and stick it where the sun don't shine. It is a right to own firearms for the Second Amendment for self-defense, and I would fight for that right. So there were some very angry soldiers at the time. I'll note, Mike, that I talked to a Daniel New who lives in Texas, and his son Michael New is known for refusing to wear the UN blue. Back in 1995, he refused to wear a UN beret or UN insignia on his uniform, and he was court-martialed a year later in 1996. He was stationed in Germany at the time, and the father of that soldier, Daniel New, he got to know Ernest Guy Cunningham, who wrote this thesis. He believes that Cunningham was concerned that American soldiers were losing their moral outlook, you might say, and that they might consider firing on their fellow citizens. And he wanted to put a controversial question in there to see how they'd respond. However, John McManus, the noted New American editorial guy and JBS officer that I talked about, he tended to disagree. And in his writings, he thought that Ernest Guy Cunningham was maybe pro-UN and was trying to inculcate or cultivate that idea in those soldiers. So there's controversy there as to whether this was innocent or not. But it's very indicative and illustrative, Mike, of what's been going on. And I understand from talking to Dan New also on the phone recently that there have been subsequent attempts to get soldiers to answer these kinds of questions. And over time, they've been worn down. And reportedly, more soldiers now are claiming they'd be willing to fire on their own citizens under certain circumstances. So apparently the military's been whittling away at this, trying to reduce the soldiers' resistance to such ideas, which is, pretty revealing in terms of the New World Order Army and the way the militaries are being reoriented. So
Yes.
A very important historical item that's kind of an evergreen. It's something always to be concerned about, Mike. So be back.
Yep.
Go back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Okay, now the issue of food and food production is something we've been commenting on for quite some time now, and of course we have made the point that with the New Deal for farmers and various other environmental schemes that are running at the moment, that not only arable land is being taken out of crop production, but the number of farm animals being kept is being vastly reduced. So my question is that in a country where we are apparently bringing in millions of, or at least hundreds of thousands of new people net in terms of net migration every year, how are we going to feed ourselves? Well, you'll be glad to know that the UK government has set up a new organisation called the National Alternative Protein Innovation Centre, NAPIC. And this is all about lab-grown meat and the use of insect protein and other things. It's being set up in the hope of finding sustainable alternatives for normal things that we eat, like steak and chicken. It's a £38 million entity, according to the UK government. That includes a £15 million bung from UKRI. It's going to lead UK alternative protein knowledge and innovation ecosystem, as they describe it. Its vision is to make alternative proteins mainstream for a sustainable planet. And it's led by the Universities of Leeds, Sheffield, Imperial College London, perhaps unsurprisingly, and the James Hutton Institute in collaboration with over 100 national and international partners. And I'm just going to remind everybody that the Tory government produced this lovely little piece of legislation in 2022 called the Genetic Technology (Precision Breeding Act. And if we remind ourselves about what this was going to do, was to remove plants and animals and I'm quite not, because that was a typo, that was their typo. So remove plants and animals produced through precision breeding technologies from regulatory requirements applicable in England to the environmental release and marketing of genetically modified organisms. So remove anything that's produced via this from any kind of regulation, and introduce two notification schemes, one for precision bred organisms used for research purposes and the other used for marketing purposes, in other words, for us to eat. The information collected would be published on a public register on gov.uk. Now, I am not aware of any such public register having been set up to date, but that's what they said at the time. And I'm going to suggest that there is a corollary here. So just to end this segment, the government also, although they're investing in this themselves, they are looking for external investment as well. So the UK and northeast of England is leading the way when it comes to developing environmentally friendly and sustainable plant-based and alternative protein products. And they are inviting investment from third parties. Debbie, what could possibly go wrong?
Can we save that for extra? Because I think it might take too long on the news, Mike.
Yes.
Seriously. Let's come on though to energy, because we're coming up for autumn, winter, and are we looking at a stealth currency? So I just want to give you a little, we've got a lot to flick through. So let's start on COP, because they want to ditch fossil fuels. That's the whole plan moving forward. So if we ditch fossil fuels, that comes at a price, because the latest from Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she's going to axe winter fuel payments for millions of pensioners. And in a subsequent article in the Telegraph, they project that bills are going to be literally hiked up by £150, which is going to hit people. I mean, really hit people badly. British Gas have even issued their own 6-week warning to customers to check their tariffs before October. And of course, the budget is just around the corner in October. And will we be paying per mile? It looks from Birmingham Live are reporting new UK pay per mile car tax system from October, and bans are aggressive. So that's something to look forward to. Then we're looking at all the other things the government are trying to force on us, heat pumps, which we know are very expensive to install and uneconomical. But back in 2006, I've been tracking back, and in 2006, DEFRA published the Rough Guide to Individual Carbon Trading. So what does it say? Well, it goes on to say that we're talking about personal carbon allowances here, which is actually rations, let's call it by what it is. And they don't think that any pilot is necessary. They don't actually want to ask the public, but we'll talk about that in a minute. They want to model it pretty much on the London congestion charge, which just rolled in by stealth. So on the next slide, you'll find out what a personal carbon allowance is. It's a PCA, and it's going to be compulsory. This is what they're planning. They're compulsory rations for adults, and we're not quite sure whether children will get any ration at all. And this will include all household energy, including if you're going on holiday and you're maybe flying. How will you do it? Well, probably through an app, but you're also going to have a carbon credit card, which will be debited when the carbon's consumed. But how have they modelled it? Well, they've modelled it on Tesco Club Card, Nectar and Boots Advantage Card. And apparently 65 to 85% have loyalty cards. And staggeringly, the Club Card database, the Tesco's Club Card database, they're collecting 50 billion pieces of data per year. I mean, that's just huge. If that's not a reason to get rid of your Tesco's Club Card, I don't know what is. What about the public acceptability? Well, actually, at that point, no one had done any work on it at all. Although a focus group in Edinburgh on carbon trading and carbon taxation are concerned and were concerned about fraud, civil liberties, fairness. And of course, this is going to be linked to ID cards. And we're not talking about paper ID cards, we're talking about digital ID. So moving forward to 2011, you can start to see the way of travel. And we're looking at onshore, offshore wind farms, marine energy, biomass energy. I mean, just huge. And what is the public reaction and acceptability? Well, the public aren't going to accept it because according to the document, pilots aren't a good idea. Sorry, have you? Yeah. I've just missed the slide there, I think, Mike. Okay, well, it's fine. We'll just carry on then. Pilots aren't a good idea. Why? Because they are a risk. They're a risk because the public won't want them. And this is how the London congestion charge was rolled in without anybody knowing. If you skip to the next slide, the UK renewable energy map. So this is where I'm saying Charles and everybody on UK Column have been talking about biomass electricity, onshore, offshore wind farms. So we know what that's all about. But have you heard of TECs? And TECs are tradable energy quotas. This is a House of Commons document. It was back in 2011, an all-parliamentary group on peak oil, chaired by John Hemmings. And you asked, Mike, what the Green Party have been doing or where they are, and this is where they are. The late David Amess was also on this APG. But the lean economy was founded by David Fleming, and it's significant, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But they're really leaning on a report in the next slide called The Oil Crunch, which predicted and concluded that global oil production would be unable to continue to grow beyond 2013. And a year later, the UK Energy Research Centre concluded that 2/3 of current global crude oil may need to be replaced by 2030. There's that 2030 again. And Ofgem at that time warned that there would be shortages and breaks in supply. And let's not forget our good old friends, Chatham House. Oh, sorry, Common Purpose. Yes, sorry. Sorry, I think we've got the slides out of sync a little bit, but John Hemming basically concluded here with Chatham House. We've got Chatham House and Lloyd's saying that techs provide the fairest and most productive way to deal with the oil crisis and to simultaneously guarantee reductions in fossil fuel use to meet climate change targets. So what more can we ask? Well, if we look at the next slide, you can see Common Purpose there, a plan for all seasons. I'm sure Brian will be watching with interest because there we go again. A rationing system will be required to sustain a fair entitlement and available fuels. So this is going to motivate, apparently, the whole of society. And what are their aims? Well, they're going to have to prepare us. How are they going to prepare us? Psychological techniques. So psychological preparation. Apparently, we all need to be informed of this, but with no pilot consultation and no discussion, we won't know about anything. We will end up being told. And then, of course, you've got the second preparation, which is practical, where they're going to need to roll it out pretty quickly. They say in the next slide that techs could be a game changer, that they are acting, so must you. And if we look at today in 2024, how is this rolling out? Well, we have the Fleming Policy Centre, which was founded by David Fleming. Now, he's an elder of the Green Party, and he's also been involved, he was a Green Party economic spokesman, but he's also been involved in transition towns movements. He died in 2010, and he's an ardent critic of nuclear power. So the Fleming Policy Centre are inventing the future. And what they say, and this is the really important bit, is that every adult gets an equal free entitlement to weekly techs, weekly. So children may be not included. So whenever you buy petrol, it will be deducted from your tech. 1 unit will be 1 kilo of carbon. If you use less, you can sell your surplus. If you need more, you can buy more. The number of units available will be determined by the national carbon budget, encouraging common purpose. Here is some of tech's champions. In the next slide, you can see John Fleming, Lord Smith of Finsbury, Chris Smith, and of course, Caroline Lucas. So that's what Caroline Lucas has been busy doing. And of course, you're going to be able to download this on your smartphone or on a credit card. So Do Black, the world's first credit card. This was back in 2019. They've come on from there, but you can just see how they're going to roll this out. The next slide will tell you it's a Swiss Fin tech team who have teamed up with MasterCard. And they say that this is the first card ever to prevent consumers from exceeding their limit based on carbon emissions caused by their consumption. And finally, to tie it up, every transaction counts, creating the infrastructure for climate action economy. They were funded in 2018. And here's the CEO, Matthias Wilkstrom, who is a regular speaker around Europe and at the United Nations. So is this something we have to look forward to? I believe it might be. Oh, yes, sorry. From ground regeneration and nutrient density with Farmers Angus. Stephanie reminded me of this, where he is talking exactly of carbon rations and carbon quotas. So please go and look at that.
Mark, back to you then, and give us an update on, common purpose colours here with the billionaire family business, but we're talking about the US election.
Yeah, of course, big money plays such a huge role in U.S. elections. And pretty soon, not today, but pretty soon I'll be looking into connections with big money and polling organizations, as well as ownership of the voting machine companies, the companies that produce the machines that count the vote. Those are all things I'm looking into. But anyway, the billionaire family business, this is a report. 50 billionaire clans have already spent over $600 million on the 2024 U.S. elections, mostly to preserve their own fortunes. And moving on from there, this comes from Tada, Americans for Tax Fairness. describing itself as a diverse campaign of more than 420 national, state, and local endorsing organizations unified in their support of a fair tax system that works for all Americans. ATF is a project of the new Venture Fund, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which means it itself is tax exempt. And I'll just note, just for clarity, that the head of that venture fund, he does have some connections with the Clinton family, which is ubiquitous. The Clintons pop up here, there, and everywhere. Anyway, there is some merit to this, though. It just needs an objective look. Just 50 billionaire families have already injected more than 600 million, as noted, collectively into the crucial 2024 elections, with that number sure to show accelerating growth in the final 6 months of the campaign. These billionaire clans, interesting words, donated this money mostly to political parties, political action committees, and outside spending groups, including super PACs. And this is as of May 9th. These numbers are as of May 9th this year, offering further proof that the nation's richest families consider democracy nothing more than a commodity that they can buy. The country was really founded as a republic, not as a direct democracy, and that's actually part of the problem. They kind of overlook that. But anyway, this is the latest in a series of billionaires buying elections from Americans for Tax Fairness. They get a lot of their info from Open Secrets, which is a very legit organization, I might add, Mike. I went to one of their seminars in 2012, approximately in DC, and they were very good in a very nonpartisan way at showing the way money influences politics in the U.S. Anyway, some of the findings of the Americans for Tax Fairness study, this current study, are as follows. The 50 billionaire families who had injected the most money into the political system as of May 9th donated the 600 million to these entities I mentioned. Over 2/3, 69% of the money has been in support of Republican candidates. Less than a quarter, or 23%, has backed Democrats, and the remaining 8% cannot be classified on a partisan basis. Even among these top 50 spending families, donations are highly concentrated. The top 10 family clans, including prominent conservative families like the Kochs, the Mellons, and the Waltons, Waltons is Walmart, have contributed over half, or 359 million, over half of that 600 million. The 50 billionaire mega donor families in this study are collectively worth over 1 trillion, meaning that 600 million, the 600 million they've spent on politics only equals 0.06% of their total wealth. The equivalent donation for the average household would be about $100. So these 50 billionaire families alone have the political spending capacity of over 6 million ordinary American families. An interesting statistic, that's for sure. And this is just a chart that outlines it a little bit more. Readers can freeze the screen if they want to study it in depth. But all the red ones are Republican donations out of that 600 million. Americans for Prosperity was founded by the infamous Koch brothers, spelled K-O-C-H. 41.8 million for Make America Great Again, which is Donald Trump. So all the claims that Kamala Harris is beating Trump in the polls kind of runs against the grain, where a lot of this money is going not to Democrats, but Republicans. So there's something to sort out there that I'll be working on in the next few weeks. A little bit more from Americans for Tax Fairness. Billionaires can impact elections through unlimited contributions to so-called dark money groups that don't reveal their donors. Sometimes those groups that receive the money can only have a letterhead and a P.O. box and not even have a physical location, and yet they'll rake in billions of unaccountable money. The free spending of billionaire families is only possible because of a broken campaign finance system, as this group sees it, in their opinion. Reform of campaign finance rules to outlaw unlimited political contributions that give billionaire families an outsized say in the political process is being called for. Also, the enacting of special taxes on billionaire wealth is being suggested. They believe that's a good idea, or at least all the income from their wealth. And there's also a call to strengthen the estate tax to curb the growth of economic dynasties. And a little clip from CNBC gives a little bit more on this. American billionaires spent a record $880 million on the U.S. midterm elections back in 2022. This item is from November of 2022. And as it says here, American billionaires spent a record $880 million on those midterms, which is mostly when Congress and Senate seats are up. Billionaire spending at the time was up 44% over the 2018 midterms, so it's exponentially growing, and it's expected to approach $1 billion by next week at that time, according to Americans for Tax Fairness. They were quoted by CNBC here. While U.S. billionaires poured $1.2 billion into the 2020 presidential elections, their outsized spending in the midterms shows just how much is at stake for wealthy donors of both parties. So money is really steering things here in the States, especially. Not a big surprise, but it's interesting to hear the numbers and the scope of it. Anyway, this last thing, Mike, is a historical item, forbidden American economic history. These things were talked about a lot going back to the 1930s. As he was known, Senator Huey P. Long, he was known as the Louisiana Kingfish. He wrote a book called Every Man a King. He actually called for a national law that would limit how rich a person could get. And I know that sounds rather socialistic. I'm just reporting it for the information about it. People can make their own opinions about it. The middle image is a little bit more on that slide. The middle image is of Father Charles E. Coughlin, the great radio priest of Michigan. I have visited his shrine a number of times. He spoke out about economic injustices in a different way. And then Ferdinand Lundberg, a fascinating author, America's 60 Families. He showed way back in the 1930s and since then how many of the same families then are controlling things even today. So back to you, Mike.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. Thanks. Okay, Debbie, let's come back to you for a final comment here.
Well, what have I stumbled upon? And at this point, I'm hoping that this will be able to be tweeted. I'd like to welcome Guinness World Records because I tweeted them to ask them, did they have a record for the longest CV in history? And they don't have, they have a category, but they don't have anybody that's been nominated. So what did I stumble upon? Well, many of our regular viewers will know of Professor Susan Mickey. Professor Susan Mickey, behavioural scientist. She advises the WHO and she's in charge of the behaviour change agenda in the UK. And I found her CV and I couldn't put it in a screenshot. So roll VT and I'll talk over it as you scroll down it. It takes 32 seconds, I believe. It's 110 pages long. I'm not quite sure how long you'd like a CV to be, Mike, which you'd get landing on your desk, but we've got all of her appointments, her affiliations, her academic supervision, her books, her articles, her symposiums, her teaching, her honours, her awards, her journals, her reviewing journals, her research bodies, her publishers, her references to antimicrobial resistance, to smoking, which of course she's in partnership with her husband, Professor Robert West. So Guinness World Records, is that a record? 110 page CV. Perhaps we could get everybody to write to Guinness World Records and she could get another prize. Just saying.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Okay, thank you for that, Debbie. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today as well. And thanks to everybody that's watched. We will be back in a few minutes. Stick around if you're a UK Column member for News Extra. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great weekend and we'll see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. Bye-bye.